Is Cape Town safe? If you're thinking about coming to Cape Town, you might have heard some stories that maybe it's not the safest city in the world. Maybe it is indeed the 15th most dangerous city in the world. But any city can be dangerous, and Cape Town's like a lot of cities. Here's what we'll say about safety in Cape Town. If you show up and you're naive and you're not prepared, you might have an unpleasant experience like one of our friends. There's neighborhoods that are completely safe that we're in right now, the V&A waterfront or Greenpoint or Sea Point, very touristy areas with security roaming around, and you've really got nothing to worry about. But once you go into the City Bowl, which is essentially the downtown area that is encompassed by the mountains, Table Mountain and Lion's Head and whatnot, that downtown area is maybe slightly more sketchy than most Westerners will be used to. The V&A waterfront, one of the top spots to visit in Cape Town as a tourist, non-local. And like I said, everything is very safe. You see people leaving their purses and their phones around, which is just not going to happen in the City Bowl of Cape Town and some other neighborhoods. We stayed in Greenpoint. Greenpoint was very nice, seemed very secure. It's right next to Sea Point and the V&A waterfront. It's all very close to the water. That's kind of where the affluent live, and that's where it's safest. However, when you get into those neighborhoods, you'll see there's a lot of walls and there's electric fence at the top, and that's because the one property that decides not to do that is the one that gets hit. So pretty much everyone in the worst parts of town have built these walls, and they have exterior gates with locks on them. And then you have another inner door with another lock on it, and then you have the electric fence and barbed wire and spikes and everything. And it's just a precaution. It's just like a preventative measure that you have to do. Also, we're here for a wedding for one of our buddies, and his now wife told us, who's a local, who's lived here her whole life, told us some of the things she does. Like when she drives around, she has her windows up, even though she doesn't have air conditioning, and she has like a tiny little triangle panel open for airflow, which is not much. Keeps the doors locked, obviously. And as a woman with a purse, she loops the seatbelt through the purse and then buckles it, and then she puts a blanket over her lap, over the purse, so you can't even see it, because at red lights, if they see something valuable, they're known to dash up and try to grab it. And on top of all that, she carries a little pocket-sized taser just to defend herself. So coming from a local that tells us these are the precautions that they take every day in their lives, that lends itself to the fact that maybe the city's not super safe in all areas, and they've just learned to live with it. We were even told that when they're just watching TV at night, depending on where you live, they will lock the door, arm the security, and keep a large knife next to them just in case someone were to break in and try to do a smash and grab on their property. Parts of towns, pretty much all the homes have the walls with the barbed wire and the electric fence and the spikes. And something else that we need to talk about, which is their private security, essentially, industry in Cape Town. So the security industry in Cape Town is actually really interesting, and we got to talk to someone who's employed with one of these local security companies. They're called like Quick Response Forces. There's a bunch of them in Cape Town. You see their signs all over every single house and electric fence, and basically they outnumber the police force and the military 10-1 here in Cape Town and South Africa at large. So after the apartheid ended, there were a lot of guys that were upset with how there was a reshuffling of leadership positions in society in general that were in the military and the police force. So they just pulled shocks and said, you know what, I'll start my own private company, and now that's what they do. And it's just kind of like a utility. You pay your water, you pay your electric, and you pay for your security, your private security. Basically, they aim to be to your house within 2 to 4 minutes, so a really fast response if you hit the panic button. Everyone has a panic button, or if your alarm's tripped. And it's just kind of a necessary evil. And really, it's a huge deterrent for all these criminals, knowing that every single house has these guys that will show up. And these aren't local police. These are like ex-military, and they're coming just to kick the door down and kick some butt and take names later, and then leave the cleanup, if you will, for the police. And it's kind of a weird thing to think about with being American and a Westerner, that we just depend on our police force that are really, really good at what they do. But here they just don't have the funding, and everyone's diverting that funding into private security instead.
I'm Jed, semi-professional traveler. I got to South Africa a few days before my friends, so I was on my own for like 3 days. And got off the plane. I was just walking the streets with my backpack on. Don't recommend it. I was on Long Street, which is supposed to be like a touristy area, but I heard later that it's pretty sketchy, and I agree. Because I was just sitting outside at a cafe and having a beer, and this guy approached me and he sat down, and I was like, all right.
Is a little bit sketchy. It reminds me of The Purge. Like at night, when everything's dark, things get a little bit wild. And
And
then,
then he asked for some money, and I was like, no thanks. And then he pulled out a knife and he showed it to me. He didn't wave it at me, he just had it in the palm of his hand underneath his shirt. He's like, I do have this. I'm like, well, maybe you can have some money, you know? I gave him like 40 Rand, I guess, which is, I don't know, like 4 American dollars. I don't know. Anyways, it was my first day in town, so I didn't know what to do. I decided it was easier just to give up the money. But that's how I kind of got robbed at knife point.
yeah, you're always just like on alert here. And it's a little unsettling, the things that you see, and just how not relaxed you are walking around. But it's kind of part of the experience and understanding their culture, and it makes you appreciate the things that you have at home.